The red warning lights flashed across the communication center as Lieutenant Jake Murphy leaned forward in his chair. The message had been repeating for 6 hours now, broadcast across every known frequency in the galaxy. Jake had heard desperate calls before, but this one made his stomach turn cold. "This is Kepler Mining Colony 77 Alpha," the alien voice crackled through the speakers. "We are facing complete biological extinction. We require immediate medical assistance. Any species with advanced medical capabilities, please respond. We are dying." Jake rubbed his tired eyes and played the message again. The voice belonged to a Zilani, one of the peaceful alien species that lived on the outer rim planets. The Zilani were known throughout the galaxy as gentle creatures who preferred mining and farming to fighting. They had copper-colored blood and skin that looked like polished metal in the right light. The message had been sent from their largest colony, home to nearly 2 million Zilani families. Jake had visited their home world once during a diplomatic mission. The Zilani children had given him flowers and asked about Earth. They were curious about humans but seemed almost afraid of them at the same time. Now they were dying. Jake stood up and walked to Commander Lisa Brooks's office. She was studying tactical reports when he knocked on her door. "Come in," she called. Jake entered and placed the message transcript on her desk. "Ma'am, we've been receiving this distress call for the past 6 hours. It's from the Zilani colony on Kepler 442b. Commander." Brooks picked up the paper and read it quickly. Her expression grew serious. "How bad is it?" "The automated systems are showing massive population decline. Whatever hit them is spreading fast. They're calling it the Red Plague." Brooks leaned back in her chair. "Any other species responding to the call?" Jake shook his head. "The Zilani don't have much to trade. Most civilizations ignore their calls for help. The few that might respond are too far away to reach them in time." "What about their own medical capabilities?" "That's the problem, ma'am. The Zilani are peaceful. Their medical knowledge is basic compared to what we have. They've never dealt with anything like this." Brooks stood up and walked to the large window that showed Earth spinning slowly below them. The planet looked peaceful from up here, but Jake knew better. Earth had been through countless wars, plagues, and disasters. Each crisis had taught humanity something new about survival. "What do we have available for a rescue mission?" Brooks asked. Jake pulled out another report. "That's the complicated part. The only ships we have that can reach Kepler 442b in time are the Dreadnoughts returning from the Outer Rim Patrol. The Titan-class ships?" "Yes, ma'am. The Vengeance, Liberty, and Defiance. They're loaded with weapons and carrying full marine complements." Brooks was quiet for a long moment. Jake could see her thinking through the problem. The Dreadnoughts were humanity's most powerful warships. Each one was over 2 kilometers long and carried enough firepower to destroy entire fleets. They were built for war, not mercy missions. "How many medical personnel do we have available?" she finally asked. "We've got about 300 military medics, field surgeons, and medical technicians we can load onto those ships, plus all the medical supplies from the emergency reserves." "Military medics?" "Yes, ma'am. Combat doctors trained to work under fire. They're used to treating massive casualties in hostile environments." Brooks nodded slowly. Human military medicine had evolved over centuries of warfare. When soldiers were dying on battlefields across the galaxy, human medics had learned to save lives under impossible conditions. They could perform surgery while bombs exploded around them and treat diseases that would kill other species. "The Zilani might not understand," Jake said carefully. "They separate their military and medical functions completely. They've never seen warrior doctors before. Will our medical teams be effective against this plague?" Jake looked at the reports again. "Our combat medics have dealt with biological weapons, alien pathogens, and mass casualty events. If anyone can help the Zilani, it's them." Brooks made her decision. "Contact the Dreadnought fleet. Tell Captain Turner to prepare for immediate departure to Kepler 442b. Load every available medical professional and all the supplies they can carry. Ma'am, those are warships. The Zilani are going to be terrified when they see them." "The Zilani called for help, Lieutenant. We're going to help them." Jake saluted and turned to leave, but Brooks called him back. "Lieutenant, make sure Captain Turner understands this is a rescue mission. Those people are dying, and we're the only ones who can save them." "Yes, ma'am." An hour later, Jake watched from the observation deck as the three massive dreadnoughts prepared for hyperspace jump. Each ship was a monument to human military engineering, bristling with weapons and defense systems. Their hulls were scarred from countless battles, and their weapon arrays could turn asteroids into dust. But today, they carried doctors instead of Marines, medical supplies instead of ammunition, hope instead of destruction. The Vengeance, Liberty, and Defiance disappeared into hyperspace, racing toward a dying world. Jake hoped the Zilani would understand that sometimes salvation came in unexpected forms. On the bridge of the Vengeance, Captain Alex Turner looked at his orders one more time. Save 2 million aliens using warships designed to kill. He had seen stranger things in his 20 years of service, but not many. Dr. Maria Santos, the chief military surgeon, stood beside him reviewing medical protocols. She commanded the largest emergency medical team humanity had ever assembled. Her doctors were trained killers who had chosen to save lives instead of taking them. "How long until we reach Kepler 442b?" she asked. 18 hours, Turner replied. "Think you can save them?" Dr. Santos looked at the tactical display showing the dying colony. "Captain, we've saved soldiers who are more dead than alive. We've performed surgery in exploding bunkers and treated plague victims in radioactive zones. Those people called for doctors, and that's exactly what they're getting." Turner nodded. "Even if we arrive in warships? Especially because we arrive in warships. Our medical capabilities exist because of our military training, not despite it. The Zilani are about to learn that sometimes the best healers are the ones who know how to fight." The massive dreadnoughts raced through hyperspace toward Kepler 442b, carrying humanity's answer to the desperate plea for help. They had called for doctors, and Earth had sent the only kind of doctors who could save them now. The space around Kepler 442b had been empty and quiet for days. Then 3 massive shadows dropped out of hyperspace like thunder in the darkness. The Terran dreadnoughts Vengeance, Liberty, and Defiance hung in space above the dying planet. Each ship stretched over 2 kilometers long, their hulls dark gray and covered with weapon turrets. Gun barrels pointed in every direction like the spines of some ancient war beast. Shield generators hummed with barely contained energy. On the surface of Kepler 442b, Administrator Vex Kane stared at his communication screen in horror. The 3 ships on his sensors were larger than anything he had ever seen. Each one carried enough firepower to burn his entire world to ash. "Sir," his assistant whispered beside him, "should we activate the emergency protocols?" Vex Kane's copper-colored hands shook as he reached for the communication controls. His people were already dying from the Red Plague. Now it looked like an invasion fleet had arrived to finish what the disease had started. "Unknown warships," he transmitted, trying to keep his voice steady. "Please identify yourselves." "We are a peaceful colony. We have no military capabilities. We surrender." The response came quickly, spoken in calm human words. "Kepler Colony 77 Alpha, this is Captain Alex Turner of the Terran defense ship Vengeance. We received your medical distress call. We are here to help." Vex Kane blinked his large eyes in confusion. "Medical distress call? But you are—" "Warships. Confirmed. We are military vessels responding to your emergency." The administrator looked around his control room. Several Zilani technicians stared back at him with the same confused expression. In their culture, military and medical functions were completely separate. Soldiers fought, doctors healed. The two never mixed. "Captain Turner," Vex Kane said carefully, "we called for medical assistance. We need doctors, not warriors." There was a pause before the human replied. "Administrator, we brought doctors. They happen to be military doctors." On the bridge of the Vengeance, Captain Turner looked at the planet below. The colony's cities showed up as dim patches of light on the night side. Many areas that should have been bright were completely dark. The plague was winning. Dr. Maria Santos stood beside him, studying the medical data they had received from the colony. Her uniform carried the insignia of both a military officer and a chief surgeon. She had served in 3 wars and saved more lives than she could count. "How bad is it down there?" Turner asked. "Worse than I expected," Santos replied. "The Red Plague attacks their copper-based blood system. Their organs are shutting down faster than their doctors can treat them. Death rate is climbing every hour. Can you help them? Santos nodded firmly. Our combat medics have dealt with biological weapons before. We know how to handle mass casualties. But Captain, they are not going to understand our methods. Turner knew what she meant. Human military medicine was aggressive and sometimes brutal. Combat medics were trained to save lives under the worst conditions. They would cut off a limb to save a body, perform surgery without anesthesia if necessary, and make life or death decisions in seconds. The Zilani practiced gentle medicine. They believed in letting the body heal naturally. They had never seen doctors who fought disease like it was an enemy to be destroyed. Dr. Santos, those people are dying. Do whatever you need to do. Santos saluted. Yes, sir. I'll start loading the medical teams into the shuttles. Down in the hangar bays of all 3 dreadnoughts, hundreds of military medics prepared for deployment. These were not ordinary doctors. They wore combat armor under their medical coats. They carried weapons alongside their medical equipment. They had trained to save lives while battles raged around them. Sergeant First Class Danny Rogers checked his medical kit one more time. Inside were surgical tools, combat drugs, emergency equipment, and everything needed to perform battlefield medicine. He had served as a combat medic for 8 years and had never lost a patient he could save. Listen up, Dr. Santos announced to the assembled medical teams. We are going into a disaster zone. 2 million civilians are dying of a plague their doctors cannot treat. We are their only hope. The medics listened carefully. Many of them had deployed to disaster zones before, but always on human worlds. This would be their first time treating aliens with completely different biology. The Zilani have copper-based blood, Santos continued. Their organs are similar to ours but smaller. They heal slowly and have very low pain tolerance. Most importantly, they have never seen military medicine. They will be afraid of our methods. Combat medic Lisa Park raised her hand. Ma'am, are we cleared to use human treatment protocols? Whatever saves lives, Park. We adapt human medicine to Zilani biology, and we save as many as we can. The first shuttles launched from the Dreadnoughts 20 minutes later. Each shuttle carried a team of military medics, tons of medical supplies, and equipment designed for battlefield conditions. The shuttles were heavily armored and could land in combat zones, but today, they carried healers instead of warriors. As the shuttles descended toward the plague-stricken planet, the Zilani watched from their dying cities. The ships coming down from orbit looked like military assault craft. But when the landing ramps opened, human medics in military uniforms stepped out carrying medical equipment. Administrator Vex Kane met the first shuttle at the colony's main landing pad. He had expected to see alien warriors emerging to conquer his world. Instead, he saw Dr. Santos walking toward him with a medical scanner in her hands. Administrator Vex Kane, she asked, extending her hand in the human gesture of greeting. Vex Kane stared at her. She wore military armor but carried healing equipment. Her uniform showed both combat decorations and medical certifications. She was something his people had never imagined, a warrior healer. You are a doctor? He asked. Combat surgeon, Terran Defense Forces. I understand you have a medical emergency. Vex Kane looked past her at the other humans unloading from the shuttles. They all wore military gear but carried medical supplies. Some had weapons, but they also had healing equipment. It was like seeing mythical creatures that existed only in impossible stories. We do not understand, Vex Kane said. You are soldiers, but you came to heal? Dr. Santos looked at the dying city around them. Bodies lay in the streets. The few Zilani still moving looked weak and sick. The smell of death filled the air. Administrator in human military doctrine, there is no difference between protecting life and saving life. We came here to fight this plague. We brought the tools we need to win. She gestured to her medics, who were already setting up emergency treatment stations. These are combat medics. They know how to save lives when everything is falling apart. That is exactly what you need right now. Vex Kane watched as the human medics began working with efficiency he had never seen before. They moved like soldiers, but worked like doctors. They treated the medical crisis like a battle they intended to win. For the first time in days, the administrator felt something he had almost forgotten. Hope. Dr. Maria Santos stepped into the Zalani Medical Center and stopped. The smell hit her first. Death, sickness, and despair mixed together in the recycled air. Bodies covered in red rashes lay on every available surface. Some were still breathing. Many were not. Zalani doctors moved slowly between the patients, their copper-colored faces showing defeat. They whispered soft words and tried to make the dying comfortable. None of them were fighting to save lives anymore. How many are infected? Santos asked Administrator Vex Kane. Nearly 800,000, he replied, his voice barely a whisper. We lose 3,000 every day. Our doctors say there is nothing more they can do. Santos looked around the medical center. The Zalani had given up. In their gentle culture, accepting death was considered peaceful. Fighting against it was seen as violent and wrong. Your doctors are wrong, Santos said firmly. She turned to Sergeant Danny Rogers, who had followed her inside. Rogers, set up triage stations. I want every patient sorted by survival probability in the next hour. Rogers nodded and began barking orders to the other medics. Within minutes, human combat medics were moving through the medical center with military efficiency. They carried scanners, medical equipment, and determination that the Zalani had never seen before. Combat medic Lisa Park knelt beside a young Zalani who was barely breathing. Red spots covered his skin, and his copper-colored blood had turned dark. The local doctors had marked him as hopeless. Park pulled out her medical scanner and ran it over the patient. The readings showed massive organ failure, but she had seen worse on battlefields. She opened her emergency medical kit and began preparing an injection. A Zalani doctor approached her nervously. Please do not hurt him. He is beyond help. Let him pass peacefully. Park looked up at the alien doctor. He is not dead yet. That means I can still save him. She injected the patient with human combat stimulants modified for Zalani biology. The drugs were designed to keep human soldiers fighting, even with severe injuries. Park hoped they would keep this patient alive long enough for treatment. The young Zalani's breathing became stronger almost immediately. Across the medical center, Dr. Santos was examining the most critical patients. She found a Zalani female, whose organs were shutting down from the plague. The local doctors had made her comfortable and were waiting for her to die. Santos pulled out surgical tools and began preparing for emergency surgery. She needed to remove infected tissue before it killed the patient. What are you doing? Asked a horrified Zalani doctor. Saving her life, Santos replied without looking up. This infection is spreading through her bloodstream. I need to cut out the infected areas. But that will cause terrible pain. Pain is temporary, death is permanent. Santos began the surgery right there in the medical center. She worked with the speed and precision of someone who had operated in exploding bunkers and burning buildings. The Zalani doctors watched in shock as she cut into living tissue to save a life. The surgery took 20 minutes. When Santos finished, the patient's vital signs were stable for the first time in days. Outside the medical center, more human medics were setting up a field hospital in the colony's main plaza. They worked like soldiers building a fortress, but their fortress was designed to heal instead of destroy. Colonel Steve Adams supervised the construction. He had commanded field hospitals on a dozen worlds and knew how to treat massive casualties. The equipment being unloaded from the shuttles was designed for battlefield conditions. I want treatment stations set up in a grid pattern, Adams ordered. Triage here, surgery there, recovery over there. This is a combat zone, people. The enemy is a plague, and we are going to defeat it. The human medics responded to his orders with military discipline. Within hours, they had created a medical facility more advanced than anything the Zalani had ever seen. Up in orbit, the Dreadnoughts were being converted into floating hospitals. Captain Turner watched as his ship's weapon manufacturing systems began producing medical supplies instead of ammunition. The massive reactors that powered the ship's guns now powered medical equipment. Captain, reported his communications officer, Dr. Santos is requesting more surgical equipment. Give her whatever she needs. Convert the torpedo tubes if you have to. On the planet's surface, the human approach to medicine was showing results. Patients who had been marked for death were beginning to recover. The aggressive drug treatments and surgical procedures that horrified the Zilani were saving lives. Combat medic Tony Martinez was treating a group of infected children when a Zilani parent approached him. "Please," the parent begged, "do not hurt my child. Your methods are so violent." Martinez looked at the sick child, then at the parent. "Your child is dying. I can save him, but the treatment will be painful. Do you want me to let him die peacefully, or do you want him to live?" The parent looked torn. In Zilani culture, causing pain was wrong even to save a life. "He will live?" the parent asked. "If I treat him aggressively, yes. If I do nothing, he will be dead by morning." The parent nodded slowly. "Save him." Martinez began the treatment. He used human combat drugs to boost the child's immune system, performed minor surgery to remove infected tissue, and gave the child stimulants to keep his organs functioning. The child cried from the pain, but his vital signs improved rapidly. By the end of the first day, the death rate in the colony had dropped by 60%. Human military medicine was working where gentle Zilani healing had failed. Dr. Santos stood in the field hospital and looked at the patients who were beginning to recover. Around her, combat medics worked with the same intensity they brought to battlefields. They fought the plague like it was an enemy army to be destroyed. Administrator Vex Kane approached her, looking stunned. "How is this possible? Our best doctors said these patients could not be saved." Santos looked at him. "Your doctors are healers. My doctors are warriors who chose to fight for life instead of death. We do not accept defeat. But your methods are so harsh. Sometimes being harsh is the most compassionate thing you can do. We cause pain to prevent greater suffering. We make hard choices to save lives." Vex Kane watched as a human medic performed emergency surgery on a patient while explosions from malfunctioning equipment echoed in the distance. The medic never stopped working, never showed fear, never gave up. "You fight death itself," Vex Kane said with wonder. "Every day," Santos replied, "and today we are winning." The Red Plague was still spreading, but for the first time since the crisis began, more people were being saved than were dying. The human warrior healers were proving that sometimes the best medicine came from those who refused to surrender to death. Administrator Vex Kane stood in the human field hospital and watched something that seemed impossible. Dr. Maria Santos was briefing her medical teams like a general preparing for war. "The plague spreads through the air systems," Santos explained to the gathered medics. "We are going to attack it like an enemy position. Teams Alpha through Delta will clear the northern districts while Echo and Foxtrot advance on the industrial zone. We cut off its supply lines and eliminate it sector by sector." The human medics nodded and checked their equipment. They carried medical scanners like weapons and planned their healing operations like military campaigns. Vex Kane had never seen anything like it. Dr. Chris Bell raised his hand. "Ma'am, what about the patients who are too weak for aggressive treatment?" "We save who we can," Santos replied firmly. "But we do not write anyone off until they are actually dead. Every life is worth fighting for." Vex Kane approached Santos after the briefing ended. "Doctor, I am trying to understand your methods. You speak of medicine like it is warfare." Santos looked at him with tired eyes. She had been working for 36 hours straight, saving lives that Zilani doctors had given up on. "Administrator, for humans, medicine is warfare. We fight against death, disease, and suffering. We use whatever weapons we have available. But medicine should be gentle, peaceful. Tell that to the plague killing your people." Santos walked away to check on her patients, leaving Vex Kane to think about her words. He watched as combat medic Tony Martinez showed a young Zilani doctor how to perform emergency surgery. "You cannot think about the pain you are causing," Martinez explained while operating on a dying patient. "You think about the life you are saving. Sometimes being brutal is the most kind thing you can do." The Zilani doctor looked sick as Martinez cut into infected tissue. "This seems so violent." "Violence is hurting someone for no reason," Martinez replied. "This is controlled aggression with a purpose. I am fighting to save this person's life." The patient on the table was an elderly Zelani who had been dying from organ failure. The local doctors had made him comfortable and waited for death. Martinez had other plans. He used human combat stimulants to keep the patient's heart beating. He performed surgery to remove infected organs and replace them with artificial ones from the Dreadnoughts medical fabricators. He fought for every minute of life. 3 hours later, the elderly Zelani opened his eyes and spoke his first words in days. Up in orbit, Captain Turner was coordinating the medical campaign from the bridge of the Vengeance. The massive warship had been converted into a floating hospital and supply depot. Status report, Turner ordered. Sir, reported his medical officer, the death rate has dropped to less than 100 per day. Dr. Santos projects complete plague elimination within 72 hours. Turner nodded. The Dreadnoughts weapon systems had been repurposed for medical use. Point defense lasers now performed precision surgery. Torpedo tubes launched supply pods to remote areas of the colony. The ship's powerful sensors tracked the plague spread in real time. Captain, his communications officer called out, "We are receiving a message from the Galactic Health Council. They want to know why military vessels are responding to a medical emergency." Turner smiled grimly. "Tell them we are demonstrating human medical doctrine. On the planet's surface, that doctrine was saving lives at an incredible rate." Combat. Medic Lisa Park had set up a treatment center in what used to be a shopping district. She was treating 50 patients at once, moving between them with military efficiency. A group of Zelani doctors watched her work with amazement. She could diagnose a patient in seconds, start treatment immediately, and move to the next case without wasting time. She worked like a soldier under fire. "How do you make decisions so quickly?" asked one of the Zelani doctors. Park looked up from a patient she was injecting with modified human antibiotics. "Combat medicine trains you to act fast. On a battlefield, hesitation kills people. You learn to trust your training and move. But what if you make a mistake? Then I learn from it and save the next person better. But doing nothing is always the bigger mistake." The Zelani doctor watched as Park's patient began breathing easier. The human antibiotics, designed to keep soldiers fighting through biological attacks, were proving effective against the Red Plague. Dr. Santos found herself working alongside Administrator Vex Kane in the main medical center. The Zelani leader had volunteered to help after seeing how the humans worked. "Dr. Santos," he said while helping move a patient, "I am beginning to understand something about your people." "What is that?" "Your military and medical are not separate, because you see them as the same mission." Santos looked at him with surprise. "Exactly. Both exist to protect life. Sometimes that means destroying threats. Sometimes it means healing wounds. The goal is always the same." They were interrupted by an alarm. One of the patients in critical care was crashing. Santos ran to the bed where a young Zelani mother was dying from multiple organ failure. The Zelani doctors stepped back, ready to let her pass peacefully. Santos pushed forward and began working. "She is too far gone," one of the Zelani doctors said sadly. "She is still breathing," Santos replied, starting an IV line. "That means there is still a chance." Santos worked for 2 hours straight. She used every piece of human medical technology available. Combat drugs to keep the patient's heart beating, artificial organs from the ship's fabricators, surgical techniques learned in battlefield hospitals. The other doctors watched as Santos refused to give up. Even when the patient's vital signs failed, Santos kept fighting. She performed CPR, used electric shock to restart the heart, and injected stimulants directly into the bloodstream. Finally, the patient's eyes opened. She looked around weakly and whispered her daughter's name. Vex Kane stared at Santos in wonder. "How did you know she could be saved?" "I did not know," Santos admitted. "But I knew she deserved someone to fight for her life until the very end. Even when it seemed hopeless. Especially when it seemed hopeless. That is when people need warriors the most." By the end of the 4th day, the transformation was complete. The plague was contained and retreating. Patients who had been dying were walking around the colony, The human approach to medicine had turned certain death into unlikely victory. But more importantly, the Zilani were beginning to understand something fundamental about their human rescuers. The same drive that made humans dangerous in war made them incredibly effective at saving lives. Vex Kane found Dr. Santos in the field hospital as she finally took a break after 4 days of constant work. "Doctor, I need to ask you something," he said. "Your people are known throughout the galaxy as warriors, but you came here to heal strangers you had never met. How do we understand this?" Santos looked out at the recovering colony. Zilani families were reuniting. Children were playing in the streets again. Life was returning to normal. "Administrator, humans fight because we believe life is worth protecting. We heal because we believe life is worth saving. There is no contradiction between being a warrior and being a healer. They are both expressions of the same thing. And what is that? The refusal to let good people suffer when we have the power to help them." Vex Kane nodded slowly. He was beginning to understand that human strength came not from their weapons or their medicine alone, but from their absolute determination to protect life at any cost. 3 weeks after the last case of Red Plague was cured, Administrator Vex Kane stood in the memorial garden at the center of the colony. Where bodies had once filled the streets, Zilani families now walked together in the evening light. Children played games while their parents watched with grateful smiles. The humans had saved them all. Vex Kane looked up at the 3 dreadnoughts still orbiting above the planet. The massive warships had become symbols of hope instead of fear. Their weapon arrays now seemed like protective shields rather than instruments of destruction. "Administrator," called a voice behind him. Dr. Maria Santos approached carrying her medical bag. Even after 3 weeks, she still checked on recovering patients every day. "Dr. Santos," Vex Kane said with a smile, "how are our people doing?" "The last patient was cleared for normal activity this morning. The plague is completely eliminated. Your colony is healthy again." Vex Kane felt tears forming in his large eyes. When the humans first arrived, he had been terrified of their warships and confused by their methods. Now he understood that they had brought the greatest gift possible, life itself. "Doctor, I must ask you something that has been troubling me." "Of course." "When we sent out our distress call, dozens of species received it. None of them came to help us. Only humans responded." "Why?" Santos was quiet for a moment, looking out at the recovered colony. "Administrator, most species see helping others as a choice based on what they might gain. Humans see it as a duty based on what we might lose if we do nothing." "I do not understand." "We could not live with ourselves if we had the power to save your people and chose not to use it. The distance did not matter. The danger did not matter. The fact that we had never met you did not matter. You needed help, so we came." Vex Kane shook his head in wonder. "But you brought warships to a medical emergency." "We brought the tools. We needed to get the job done. Our medical capabilities exist because of our military training, not despite it. The same determination that makes us effective warriors makes us effective healers." They were interrupted by Captain Alex Turner, who had come down from the Vengeance for the farewell ceremony. The 3 dreadnoughts would be leaving tomorrow, returning to their patrol duties in distant space. "Administrator," Turner said, extending his hand in the human greeting. "It has been an honor to serve your people." Vex Kane took the captain's hand. 3 weeks ago, he would have been terrified to touch a human military officer. Now he considered Turner a friend. "Captain, your people have given us a gift we can never repay. You saved our entire civilization. No payment is necessary. We did what any decent people would do." "But that is exactly the point," Vex Kane said, his voice growing excited. "Most species would not have done what you did. Most would have calculated the cost and decided it was too high. Humans calculated the cost and decided it did not matter." Turner smiled. "Administrator, when someone calls for help, humans answer. That is who we are." The farewell ceremony took place in the main plaza where the human field hospital had been built. Thousands of Zilani gathered to thank their rescuers. Many brought gifts, flowers, artwork, and small tokens of gratitude. Dr. Santos stood before the crowd and spoke in her calm, professional voice. People of Kepler Colony, it has been our privilege to serve you. You faced an impossible situation with courage and dignity. We were honored to fight alongside you. Fight alongside us? Asked a young Zelani in the crowd. You fought to stay alive while we fought to keep you alive. We were partners in the same battle. An elderly Zelani, who had been one of the first patients treated, stepped forward. Dr. Santos, we want to give you something to remember us by. He presented her with a small crystal sculpture showing a human medic carrying a wounded patient. The craftsmanship was incredible, capturing every detail of the human's determined expression. This will remind us, the elderly Zelani said, that sometimes salvation comes in forms we do not expect. Dr. Santos accepted the gift with tears in her eyes. Thank you. This means more to us than you know. As the ceremony continued, combat medic Tony Martinez found himself talking to a group of young Zelani who wanted to become doctors. Will you teach us your methods? One of them asked. Martinez smiled. The techniques we can teach you, but the most important part cannot be taught. You have to decide for yourself that every life is worth fighting for, even when it seems hopeless. Especially when it seems hopeless. That is when people need someone who refuses to give up. The young Zelani nodded eagerly. They had watched the humans work and seen what determination could accomplish. They wanted to learn how to fight for life the way humans did. As the sun set over the colony, the human medics began loading their equipment back onto the shuttles. The advanced medical systems would be needed elsewhere, but they left behind something more valuable: knowledge. Zelani doctors now knew how to perform emergency surgery, how to use aggressive treatments when necessary, and most importantly, how to never give up on a patient who still had a chance. Captain Turner stood with Administrator Vex Kane as the last shuttle prepared to depart. Captain, Vex Kane said, there is something I need you to know. This experience has changed how we see the galaxy. How so? Before you came, we believed that military power and medical compassion were opposites. You showed us they are the same thing expressed in different ways. Both exist to protect life. Turner nodded. That is the foundation of human civilization, Administrator. Everything we build, every choice we make, comes back to protecting and preserving life. We will remember this lesson. The shuttle lifted off, carrying the last of the human medical teams back to the Dreadnoughts. As it climbed towards space, Vex Kane could see Zelani families gathering on rooftops and balconies to wave goodbye to their rescuers. Later that evening, Vex Kane stood before a newly erected monument in the colony's central square. The sculpture showed a human combat medic in full military gear carrying a wounded Zelani to safety. The inscription read, "They came as warriors. They fought as healers. They saved us all." But there was a second inscription below the first, added by the Zelani themselves. When we called for doctors, Earth sent Dreadnoughts instead. We thought they had misunderstood our message. We were wrong. They understood perfectly. High above the planet, the 3 Dreadnoughts prepared for their jump to hyperspace. On the bridge of the Vengeance, Dr. Santos stood beside Captain Turner, looking down at the lights of the saved colony. Any regrets about how we handled this? Turner asked. Santos shook her head. We did exactly what we should have done. We brought the tools we needed, and we saved every life we could. Even though we terrified them at first? Fear is temporary. Death is permanent. I think they understand the difference now. The Dreadnoughts jumped to hyperspace, disappearing into the darkness between stars. But their legacy remained on Kepler 442b, where an entire civilization had learned that sometimes the greatest mercy comes from those with the strength to be merciless when necessary. The Zelani would never forget the day they called for doctors, and Earth sent Dreadnoughts instead. They had asked for healers and received warriors who chose to fight for life rather than death. It was the most human response possible.